Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday hosted by Cal State Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. This is webinar number 273. Thank you for joining us. Got a great show today. Good afternoon again. I'm your host today, your co-host, or potentially, Kelly Bearden, and I am the director of the SBDC, and we'll be joined with Sarah Marquart in just a few moments. We're actually live today in Sacramento from the historic Sutter Club, which was established, I would guess, around 1853, the second oldest private club in California here on statewide meetings that we're conducting. Sarah's going to be joining us from Alaska. She could tell us a little bit about that. So we're live and we are remote today. So we're going to flip things around today a little bit. I'm going to give you our quick introduction, and then we're going to go to our special guest speaker. So flipping the scales on you today. Those of you that are joining on time, you're really happy you did that. Because today we have a special guest, and our special guest today is Sarah Marquart, and she is the Emergency Management Specialist at USDA. And USDA Rural Development, in that role, she's the liaison to FEMA and provides coordination, expertise on a number of USDA programs available to help communities, businesses, ag producers, and families recover from disaster. And we've had a few of those, and maybe more coming, who knows? But she's got great information, has been with USDA since 2006, formerly a public information officer, lives here in California, family. Sarah, thank you for joining us from way. It's great to have you here. Take it away.
All right, thanks so much. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Right. So just a quick confirmation that everybody can hear me and see my screen. Are you seeing it in presenter mode? Or are you seeing the slides accurately?
The slides accurately.
Excellent. I love it when it works out right. Well, as Kelly mentioned, my name is Sarah Marquart. I'm an emergency management specialist at USDA Rural Development. So in that role, I serve as a liaison and a connector to FEMA and others that are impacted, other states that are impacted by disasters. I support the Western United States, so that includes California and the two current declarations that they have, as well as Kelly mentioned, Alaska. They have several declarations, one in which included impacts from Typhoon Merbok in September, but due to the winter weather that occurs in Alaska, it's taken quite some time for the recovery efforts to get started. And so now we're up here beginning to engage with some of those impacted communities. So I want to just kind of take a look at the declarations that we're working under and what this really means for everybody. And you can see here, these are the two FEMA declarations, presidentially declared disasters, DR 4683. Which you can see on the left there, that was from those December-January storms, and then the more recent DR 4699 for the February-March, and technically the incident period is still open, so the ongoing issues related to that. Included a little key there that shows some of the different distinctions that FEMA uses and how they categorize it, but really for the purposes of our programs that we're going to talk about today, there's really no difference. We'll see that Kern and Kings, Mono, not declared in this first event, and then the coastal communities and inland, not declared again, but bigger impacts here into Kern and Tulare counties. So I want to spend a little bit of time today, probably deviating from a little bit of the norm that you guys talk about on your calls, but highlighting some of the impacts to housing. So as small business owners, I mean, we recognize that not only do you have the impacts of your small business, but potentially your own home as well. And in many instances, your home very well could be your place of business. So we have a few different programs available, and I just want to spend a little time today talking about some of those resources and making you all aware of that opportunity. The first is our Rural Disaster Home Repair Grant. This was a special allocation, a special program that came to us through Congress through some supplemental appropriations to make available to those communities that were impacted in disasters in calendar year 22. And if you recall from that earlier slide, the events were from December and January. So the storms actually started December 27th, just kind of squeaking in under that calendar year 22 window, making these programs here available to everybody. The maximum grant of $40,675, it can help remove health and safety issues, and that's broad and intentionally so. It can help with those disaster related repairs that are needed. Typically, we don't allow this, but for this special grant program, those funds could have already been expended. So if you had to make some repairs to your home and you already paid for them out of pocket, or perhaps you took on other debt to pay for those, we can help reimburse those costs, or maybe you're still paying on those costs. Additionally, if homes are destroyed and you need to move a manufactured home onto your site, that's another use of this program. We also have something called a packager fee. So with that program, packagers are typically nonprofits or other organizations that can help applicants gather all the information and all the tools and resources that the information that they need in order to apply for the program. Checking all those lists, gather things up, help them check on some of those eligibility requirements, and then they kind of provide that package to USDA to underwrite and support. And so with that, there is, if we have a packager identified for this program, can use that to charge a $1,000 fee. This fee can be included in the total amount of the grant. So it does reduce the overall amount that an individual maybe could receive from this program, but the hand-holding and the assistance and the help that's received on the other end of it, I think, is often determined to be well worth their time. So this is the Rural Disaster Home Repair Grant, just to look at eligibility and who might qualify for this. It is a low-income audience, and that dollar amount is going to vary by both the county and the family size. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. Homes have to be in rural areas. So when we talk about USDA rural development, it's in our name, it's who we are. Everything has to be in a rural area. The definition of what's rural varies by program. So we'll talk about that a little bit here next as well. But additionally, this is not for renters. So this has to be for folks that are homeowners. So if you own your home and you live in your home, this isn't for properties. Maybe you have a secondary property that you rent out. That would not be applicable here, but this is if you are the primary homeowner. And we say occupancy can be authorized after the fact, and that's the instance for perhaps where you're moving a mobile home or something onto your site that you don't technically live in yet, but you will be living in it. The damages and the impacts need to have been sustained from the disaster, and we're seeing some of that stuff where mold, I know for flooding events in California, we've been so used to fire events, really, that this is the opposite end here where we're thinking about flooding and the impacts and damages from that. And something that we're not really used to as a state is the flooding and the mold impacts related to that. And so anybody that potentially did not have good work done, maybe you've already made repairs and the mold has reappeared, this is not uncommon. We've been hearing a lot about that. Damages, things like that would still be considered eligible, even if you've already tried to repair them, but then the damages are still there. Additionally, legal status is a requirement for USDA funding. So someone in the household would need to be of legal age, at least 18, and eligible to apply for this funding. As I mentioned, we are looking at rural areas. So here's a map of California. I know it's small, our state's so long, it's hard to show. So I'll give you another snapshot here in a second, but this kind of shows you that the areas that are ineligible, you can see those darker shaded kind of orange color. Those are ineligible. Those are the urban centers, obviously, if you look and see the whole LA metro area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and a few other pockets within it. But don't worry, we do have this public website, and I did let Kelly know, and I'll let everybody else know here today too, that we'll be sharing this presentation. So all the links that are included in it, you'll have access to those. So you can go onto our public facing map and type in an actual address, and it'll tell you very specifically if you're located in an eligible rural area, because that definition changes. So if you're looking at something for some of our business programs, there's the potential that you maybe are an eligible area, but when you're then looking in for the housing, it's a smaller threshold that you're going to have to meet. So wanted to zoom in a little bit closer to the part of the state we were looking at, and you can see here some more of those little pockets here. So Bakersfield proper here, not going to be eligible. Same would be true for Delano and Ridgecrest out in the eastern portion. Going up to the north, Visalia, not eligible. You can see just getting cut off there. Fresno itself, not eligible. Over onto the coast, San Luis Obispo, the city, and we've got Santa Maria. I think this might be Arroyo Grande over here. Inyo, all eligible. Mono, all eligible. Again, just a little bit of a zoom in here. You can see there are some major metro areas, like the city of Bakersfield, that would not be eligible, but certainly quite a bit of the county is eligible. Okay. So now to the income limits. So for this disaster grant program, we are looking at a low income audience. And just a reminder that if we're talking about the disaster for DR 4683, this is that map. These are all the counties. It doesn't matter what color it's shaded, as long as it was shaded some color. So this would not be applicable to Kern or Kings or Mono, but the rest of the region. So I grabbed some of the counties that would be most applicable. These four will all have the same income limits. The rest are slightly different. This is a 1 to 4 sized family, and then 5 to 8. So you can see that in some areas, these county limits are going to be quite high. We know affordability in California is a challenge, and income limits reflect that. That's maybe a topic for another presentation. Moving forward, applications. How do you get this money? How do you get funding? We have funds that are available now. We are accepting applications right now, and they're available until they are all spent. So nationally, we were provided $55 million. There were many, many disasters that occurred across the nation in 2022. California was allocated $2 million as their set aside specifically for those states. There is additional funding, I think about 14 million that's being held up at the national level, so that once states go through their state allocation, they can, on a first come, first served basis, go after those additional funds. So not a huge unlimited pot of money, but still certainly an amount that's available. And we're encouraging folks to reach out to us and find out about applying. Stephen Nodum is our housing program director in the state of California. This is his email and his phone number. And again, we've got links to the website. So there is information on there about applying and how to do that. But all of the questions and inquiries, and if you're not really sure, we are routing it out through Stephen, and then he is divvying it up across the state to the staff that are least inundated with requests. A question we get quite often is, okay, that's great. Thanks for the information. Now, when can I get my money? How is this going to work? We expect that from the time we get a completed application and then we have all the information that we need from you, we can provide funds in about 30 days. So for the federal government, I'd say that's a relatively quick time frame. This is going to be a program that pays you off of invoices. Some of you may be more familiar with some of FEMA's resources where you may get money in general, but this will not just be a check written to an individual to be spent how you need. It's based off of invoices and doing the repairs and site visits and so on and so forth. One other thing I just want to note is on some of the material that you look up, you may see references to loans. That's just because of the material that we're using. However, this is a 100% grant program. It does not require a match. You do not have to come up with any additional money of your own. If you're eligible for the full amount, then you will get the full amount. You're going to have to self-disclose that you don't have any other resources covering your costs. So for instance, if you had home insurance that was covering the cost, you would not be eligible for this. If there was a difference between the amount of money that you had received and that you needed, we could still supplement your funding and make those important repairs to your home. So that in a nutshell is our disaster home repair grant program. But we also have a regular Section 504 home repair loan and grant program. It works very similar. There are just a few key differences to it. This program, the Section 504 program, is not disaster related necessarily. It's available in what we call blue skies, any day, anytime. We always have this program available. And this is an every year, year in, year out program that we offer. Similarities to the other program is it's for, essential repairs to your home. Those damages do not have to have been incurred as a result of a disaster. Some key differences: the grants are only eligible to those who are 62 or older. So there is no age restriction on our disaster program, but there is for our regular program. We currently have a waiver in place that if your home was impacted by a disaster and you're perhaps in Kern County that wasn't declared and eligible for those early disaster grant funds, you could still get a waiver and get that maximum grant of $40,675. So still, if you met the age restriction and the income restriction, which is a little bit more than the disaster grant, you could still get that higher threshold of grant funds. Additionally, we offer loans through this program, and that is a maximum of $40,000, 20 years at 1%. So very affordable loan in that regard, and the loans and grants can be combined. There is no age restriction on the loans. And I want to go ahead and take a look here now at the income limits. So this is a program that would be available when we're talking about this 23 disaster, DR 4699. You can see we've got other communities that were impacted here that were not impacted in the first event, but it is a very low income audience. So you'll see notice a significant decline in the income limit, the maximum income per household. And again, grants are restricted by age. Okay. I'm going to move past this, and this is kind of the third option that exists for us, and this is our Section 502 Direct Home Loan Program. Again, this is our blue sky everyday program that's out there and available, regardless of whether someone has been impacted by a disaster or not. This is designed to help low-income families or individuals buy or build a home in rural America. So with that, there is no down payment requirement. We can do 100% financing. Depending on income, if you are in the lower income thresholds, there can be payment assistance, like a subsidy added to that will help reduce the overall cost. Terms can be extended out to 38 years. Again, this can be new construction. So for individuals whose homes were just completely destroyed in a disaster, sometimes the home repair grants aren't enough. At the end of the day, $40,000, or even if they combined a loan and a grant and got a maximum of $85,000, it's just not going to be enough to support the home construction. So this may be a more feasible alternative. Closing costs, repairs can also be included. So that's why we say this could be a viable option here. And it's really designed for that very low and low income audience to buy their home. All right. So much more than housing. You probably know that if you're a business. Many people maybe are surprised when we talk about USDA rural development and housing. It might not be the first thing to think about, but certainly we are much more than housing. We have a huge economic development component to this. While we don't do direct lending to individuals, individual businesses, we do have several different relenders. We have some different programs that are out there through our rural micro entrepreneur assistance program and our intermediary relending program. Have a list of those lenders that are providing the relending in your specific county. So Kelly, I'll make sure that when we share the information that we share those lists as well for any of the businesses here looking for some additional support and financing on that. Beyond that, we also can offer support for essential community facilities. This can be as big and as broad as you may think. And so while it may not impact you directly as a business, my experience with rural America is that we don't tend to wear just one hat in our communities. Often, you know, we are a small business owner and we are also involved in the schools and the local nonprofits, and the movers and shakers are moving and shaking all over town. So you maybe don't sit on the board, but maybe you're aware of some needs of your local fire department or community center. So just want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that we can help support those rural needs, and schools, education, healthcare, these are all considered essential facilities. We also have infrastructure programs, and that's including both water and wastewater programs. We can help support broadband investments, electricity, and renewable energy, or I would say energy programs in general, both renewable energy that you see here as well as energy efficiency. And that is something that that the rural businesses can take advantage of directly from USDA. And here I just wanted to highlight and showcase some different resources that we have available. There's a couple handy guides here. This summary of programs provides some really nice matrix, breaks down both the population restrictions of the various programs, as well as the types of projects that the different programs can help with, whether that's technical assistance or equipment and so on and so forth. We also have this disaster resource guide. So if you're thinking along the lines more of a disaster emphasis and focus, we can certainly direct you this way. And all of these are linked. So when you do see this, feel free to peruse these information. And I did generally very briefly go through several different programs, but we do have more detailed program fact sheets and websites available. So now it's my turn to ask you what questions you have for me.
Yes, that is a good question, Sarah. What questions do we have for you? So do go to the Q&A, and if you have a question, now's a great time to get it answered. And Sarah, I hear your conflict, your 12:30 conflict might have gone away, scheduling conflict. You might be able to stay.
Yeah, I do have more flexibility today, so certainly I can stay on for the entirety of this presentation. So if there aren't questions at this exact moment, I'm here through the hour.
Yeah, and maybe questions will come up in a minute when we hit kind of go over again the SBA portion of what's going on and the FEMA portion. I do have a question since nobody else is, everybody's a little shy today.
Yeah.
I go out of town and everybody gets shy. So my question is going to be, one thing we've been talking about on our webinar is that the opportunity comes up once more damage is discovered, that some additional counties can be added to the original disaster. So we've seen that a couple of times, I think, with both disasters you referenced.
Yeah.
Is it possible that number one can still happen? And does USDA, do you follow the lead of FEMA or SBA when more additional counties are named?
So I can't speak definitively on if it's too late for more counties to be added. I know that that's probably more of a question for the CalOES, the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, to determine that they are engaged with FEMA very closely on that process. But it is not uncommon for, as different damage assessments come through and totals are added up, that they do make those changes to that. I think that it would be surprising if it was the first disaster, the 4683, that incident period has long closed, and I think we've kind of shut the door on that one. But for this second disaster, DR 4699, I wouldn't be surprised. There are still additions being made, changes to it. I think San Bernardino is a relatively new addition for the individual assistance. So certainly some opportunities for that. But again, I'm not the expert on that. When it comes to the disaster declarations, by and large, our programs are not dependent on disaster declarations outside of that rare disaster grant home repair program that we have, which is that first disaster. Primarily, rural development programs are just regular programs that are available that we can bring to the table when there is a disaster, and we can offer those resources. When I shift gears and look at the broader USDA and look into more the Farm Service Agency, that agency is one that does look more closely to these disaster counties, and they have an emergency loan program that can get triggered by a FEMA disaster declaration at presidential level. And those funds are available to the primary and then the contiguous counties of that primarily designated county. So that is the only real program that we have outside of Food and Nutrition Services that is like triggered by these disaster declarations. Food and Nutrition Services, they have their supplemental nutrition assistance program that when there is an individual assistance declaration and we go back and look at those maps and see the differences of the colors, they can get, that triggers their support as well.
You know,
that was a really long answer to a very simple question, so sorry about that.
Well, I'll try to ask more difficult questions. So, and maybe I'm doing this right now. So, you know, I am no expert here, and I get confused by this, even though it seems like we talk about it every Wednesday for the last couple months. But I was under the impression that the second declaration that Kern was a primary county, and you didn't have that on your list. Now, we can go through the SBA portion. I have the SBA slides from there.
Yep, we've got Kern.
Oh,
for the second. It was the first. I'll go back to that first slide that compares.
Yeah, the first one we were a secondary county in Kern.
There you go.
Okay.
So in the first event, that would have been considered a contiguous county for the Farm Service Agency. For the USDA home repair grant, the disaster home repair grant, it's not an eligible community because it wasn't designated in any capacity.
Okay, my bad. I got
but
confused.
We do have them. Well, it's easy to get confused. That's why I specifically pulled the maps last night so that they were current.
I got to memorize these numbers too, these DR numbers, you know.
That's probably my fault.
I think so. I don't have any excuse, but
most people don't call them by their numbers. It's weird. It's a FEMA thing, and I'm guilty of getting sucked into to that world. So my apologies for referencing them that way, but it is the way for us to differentiate.
We've heard a lot of that. We've heard a lot of that, the last few months, those numbers and everything. I just missed that one. So that's good. I'm happy now. We're back on the list.
All right.
In my big book. Okay, well, let me roll along. If anybody has questions for Sarah, there's time to get your questions in. Let's go to the Q&A box right now. And we have a few questions here. So what about people that live in ineligible areas? Is there any sort of program for them?
Not from USDA Rural Development. We are specifically restricted by statute to rural areas, so we don't have any flexibility on those population numbers. That is something that Congress would have to change and act upon. So there are FEMA resources that are available to individuals. There are SBA resources that are available to those individuals, businesses and whatnot, but not through our agency.
Okay, you mentioned that USDA supports community agencies. Would that include something like a community zoo?
A zoo, not sure if a zoo would be eligible for considered an essential community facility, but certainly it could be a business. I think it'll depend on how it is organized, and the makeup of it, and kind of like the ownership and all of those components of it. So certainly some potential there. It may not be through a community facilities program. It may end up being through some of the business programs that are available.
What if it's a nonprofit? Let's go with a nonprofit. How would that affect?
Yeah, so nonprofits are typically eligible for our essential community facilities program. It has to have a strong tie to the community and provide that community service. I don't know that as a zoo that it would be considered that. I feel like it's tickling my brain that it's maybe not an eligible use, but I'm going to have to come back and follow up with that with you guys, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. And then you get to quote me on this recorded webinar that that Sarah Marquart said it was okay.
Oh, we would never do that. Okay, great. So if you have
I'll
questions,
get back to confirm
Sarah's
that.
going to be around while I go through the rest of these slides. So jump in and ask questions. And she's on record, though, for saying, you know, she's going to find out this answer. She's on record for saying she likes difficult questions.
I guess so.
Okay, so let's go over real quick what's up today. I think you're just getting the final update on the review of the disaster options for USDA. And so we have gone over that. A little bit on the latest on the other disaster fronts that are going on. On Capital Corridor, we're going to talk a little bit about our loan program. We'll jump into the loans and leasing when we have more time, and some other things on the economic side of things. We're going to talk about our community calendar, talk about some of the sold out events, some of the other relief programs. And as always, we'll take your questions and a poll. So let's do our poll real quick. We have two quick poll questions. And the first one is going to be, my biggest concern or problem for my business now is what? Is it inflation? Is it finding, retaining employees? Is it sales and profitability? Is it accessing capital or other? And if you have another, please add it to the chat box. It's been a little while since we've asked this question from you. What keeps you awake at night? What bugs you? What's your biggest concern? It's moving around, and we kind of like to gauge if things have improved in certain areas. So what is your biggest problem? Your biggest concern for your business at this time? And that could be rising cost with inflation. It could be finding, retaining employees. It could be getting your sales back, recovering your sales still from the pandemic and profitability, or it could be accessing the capital out there. And if you have anything else, throw it in the chat and we'll find it sometime. Okay, we have about 40% of you that have participated. And as you know, that's unacceptable from my standpoint. But I'm going to give you another couple of moments just to give us your biggest problem or concern that's affecting your business. Inflation, finding, retaining employees, sales, profitability, accessing capital, or anything else. And that's it. We'll close the poll then. And in the poll, with 44% of you participating, and last tick to 48, we'll share the results with you. And the results is finding capital, accessing capital, still a concern. And we're going to be spending a lot of time on that in the next few weeks. Maybe some new programs, newer programs that are coming along. 33% of you inflation and the costs that are rising in your business. Wow, look at that. Only 8% of you finding and retaining employees. And that was such a huge issue just maybe 6 months ago, or even a year ago going back. So thank you for that. And sales and profitability, finishing that at 17%. So thank you for poll question number 1. And now what we will do is go to poll question number 2. So poll question number 2 is going to be this question. And it's a little question about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is selling bonds from a recently failed banks. How much do they expect to sell those bonds for? 20 billion, 80 billion, or 114 billion of your tax dollars? So in the Federal Reserve, when the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, determines that a bank is not going to make it, they go in and take the assets. Of course, they take the bills and liabilities as well, but they sell off a number of aspects of that, and they've accumulated a number of bonds. And is that 20 billion? Is it 80 billion, or is it 114 billion they expect to sell? Our whimsical poll question of the day now is 56% of you participating. And give you another couple of moments, 20 billion, 80 billion, or 114 billion on what the Federal Reserve will be selling bonds for from these failed banks. Okay, we're closing the poll right now with 64% of you in, and we're going to share the results with you and show you that 50% of you think that it is 80 billion. Good guess. It's not the correct guess. It's the 38% that said 114 billion. And I believe 20 billion was the other response. So 38% of you are correct with 114 billion. They do expect to take a loss on the book value, on the valuation of those bonds, the issue of about $3 billion, but recapturing some of the cost of some of these recent bank closures that we had. So that's that for today. Moving along, let's look real quickly at some of our status of our key relief programs that are open. We'll see that the March 23rd storms, and maybe this is why I run into this problem. I don't use the actual number. I use the timeline, that timeline of March 23, the storms related. And we have the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and also damage loan if you're in a primary county is open. Sarah mentioned that the FEMA portion of the initial grant is closed. But they're still open for until October if you had an economic injury from that initial disaster and you were maybe either a principal or an adjacent secondary county. So two ways to get in on that from an economic injury standpoint. SBA loan, our Kern County micro grant program is still open. We're having a new program called the City of Bakersfield Entrepreneurship Program that'll be coming soon. And we'll be talking about that next week. Learned this week that the California Dream Fund, that nice $45 million program that assisted entrepreneurs starting last year, is not going to be returning in 2023. But the door is open for where it can return somewhere in the future. Employee retention credit, we just want to remind you that to take that credit at this point, you're going back and amending returns, payroll tax returns from 2020, 2021 during the pandemic. And that to get that credit, you are going to have to amend tax returns. A lot of you have been called by a lot of different individuals. There's a big marketing push because it's really lucrative for those companies that are charging, 15-20% of that credit amount. So do look at it very carefully if you are still looking to go down that particular area. On our weekly feature, the Economic Corner. You notice that if you have a diesel powered vehicle, you do notice that diesel prices are sliding. And so essentially that means that demand is falling for diesel. I believe in many places it's cheaper than gasoline now. So whereas you've usually seen that diesel premium. So what does that mean? Does that mean that slicing diesel prices mean that we could be headed for a troubled economy? Maybe less truckloads on the road is what many are saying because of the actual supply keeps going up. Demand is down, less freight is being shipped. Consumers are oftentimes the ones that are instrumental in holding up an economy during a recession. So is a recession imminent? We'll have to bring back one of our fine CSUB economists to find that out. Our Capital Quarter wants to just remind you that our California Micro Grant Program is set to end very soon. It's really your last call if you're looking to get that particular loan program, or excuse me, grant program that is $2,500 per business. For those that were in business on 12/31/2019 and had less than $50,000 in sales, it had to be your main source of income, and nonprofits, certain nonprofits are eligible. So if you know anybody that fits that parameter, there's a couple of other requirements for that, but hate to send money back to the state for those businesses in Kern County that are eligible. And realizing that our other two counties that we serve out of are CSU Bakersfield SBDC and Inyo and Mono, unfortunately weren't able to participate on that program because somebody decided to make it based on population. Wasn't me. So really, I think Sarah had to say earlier, really kind of manifests the need that if you still have damage to report, and particularly if it's in the Eastern Sierra where it hasn't been named a primary disaster county for the second declaration, I believe it's DR 4699. But you can actually go to websites on the county and you can claim that you had actually flood damage or snow damage or whatever. Let's call it storm damage instead of flood damage. So I get to go back and fix this slide after a couple of weeks. But if you've had any kind of storm damage, and remember that can come from winds too. If you had wind damage, it was wind, mud, rain, landslides, and others. But if you've had damage, it is important to report them. There's where you go in Inyo, Mono, and Kern. And for Kings and Tulare County, there is sites to go to as well, all those areas in the southern San Joaquin Valley. Some of the other, it's really important that you do that with the EOS. Just mentioned earlier that if there are counties that get expanded, it comes out of Cal EOS. It comes out of the state's Office of Emergency Services. And so they need to fully understand the loss to determine if it is the scope of a disaster or almost a disaster. So, and I know in some of the areas that damage has not been visible. It's been covered with snow or something else, potentially mud or other things. So do keep that in mind. SBA has opened up disaster assistance centers in Tulare and Kern County. Both of these opened up since we were on last week. There's two in Tulare County, and the two in Kern County are at the Kern River Valley Senior Center. So it's the senior center up in the KRV in Lake Isabella. And also there's a disaster recovery center for SBA and FEMA at the McFarland Community Gymnasium in McFarland, USA. So this, I think a little bit different on the declaration numbers. I'm a little confused, but just kind of a recap of what SBA has, and maybe these are the SBA disaster numbers, and before we were looking at the FEMA. But this is a quick snapshot and shows you what you have available to you in certain areas. It'll show you the borrowers, the amounts, the purpose, and then which of the disasters would actually benefit you. I can tell you by looking at these, the one on the right is DR 4699, and I forgot the other one that was the FEMA, but it was DR 46 something. So you'll see that there are a variety of different products there, your economic injury disaster loans, some home loans for both homeowners and renters, and other mitigation. And really it's that mitigation where you have the opportunity to protect against future damage, which is really kind of a missed opportunity when these disasters do occur. So if you're on a floodplain or in a flood zone, which might only flood every 20 or 25 years, it might be worth your while to look into trying to mitigate against future disaster. And these programs are here to assist you do that. I don't have to talk about USDA's assistance today. I think we got a really thorough report on that. The IRS has their deadlines, and they have extended deadlines forward. So if you didn't file, if you just said, "Ah, dang, I forgot to file. You now have until October 16th in a number of counties. So do seek out your financial advisor, your tax preparer, your CPA, or whoever you trust your affairs to, and see if that is available to you. So the IRS extension, and that is both to pay and to file in many cases. So do look into that. And there's also one here in the state of California from the Franchise Tax Board. I could almost throw a rock from here and hit this Franchise Tax Board, by the way. Of course, I would never do that. You are probably aware that we have our CSUB YouTube channel. We're up to 325 subscribers, 222 videos. This webinar will be up there in another couple of days. So it's a good resource to go back and rewatch what you have missed, or if you weren't able to attend today, you are listening to this right now, potentially on a recorded on-demand session. So note that is available. Also, you'll see I like to talk about some of my favorites, and I haven't updated this in a little bit, but after all, they are my favorites. So a lot of good topics and webinars. This obviously is going to be on my favorites one of these days. Today, webinar number 272. So contact your local SBDC. We have a lot of tools to help your business. For example, the Live Plan interactive business planning software, which makes planning, doing business planning for your business so much easier. SBDC clients are able to access their consultant and work online in formulating a plan that helps your business not only survive these disasters, but also thrive moving forward. SBDC Net, the National Information Clearinghouse, provides great demographic information for SBDC clients on a variety of different market research topics. So your particular business, you can find a lot of information out on there. You know, I like talking about cash flow forecasting, and it's incredibly important during stressful periods of time. May that be even off season or whatever, but whenever your business is impacted. We talked about our YouTube channel, and we have talked in the past about our Clayton leadership transition plan. If you're looking to transition your business to others, may it be family, may it be employees, or looking to potentially even sell that particular business. So a lot of tools in there for you to look for. Last week, we talked about a restaurant grant for $5,000 for independent restaurants. That application is open until May 7th, and we will talk about it until May 7th. So there's the website, restaurantscare.org/resilience, and a lot of good information on there to where independent restaurants can apply for some of the $5,000 grants that are being provided by the three major gas utilities, SoCal Gas, PG&E, and SDGE. So our community calendar on what we look at is, well, let's talk about us. So love to have you before we hit even the community calendar. Would have you look at take a few things. You're going to get a survey, and this surveys are very helpful in trying to plan the webinars that we want to have in the future and what you want to have and what's impactful for your particular business. Also, you can look for the Google image and leave a review on our Google page. You could subscribe to the YouTube page. Always looking for more information and more feedback to bring you high quality programming in the future. You want to save the date of Saturday, May 13th, live from your couch. Isn't that great? The Kern County Economic Summit that is presented by Cal State Bakersfield, also the Kern EDC and Greater Bakersfield Chamber, but from 6 to 7:30 on KGET Channel 17, and that's coming up. Also, there's HR resources for your business that is complimentary from America's Job Center. And there is the hotline for employers if you have any particular issues that you want to get resolved. There's a good resource from what I've heard. Just giving a little quick shout out for a few events that are sold out. And, you know, congratulations to Natisha T. Johnson and her chairing the Bakersfield Women's Business Conference, which is tomorrow. It has been a sellout. Several thousand will be in attendance. Keynote address, Damon John. Congratulations on another great women's business conference anticipated for tomorrow. And we've talked about the Nurture Child Care Training Program, which was completely full with the cohort completely filled up for April 17th, 40 new potential home-based businesses. Congratulations, Jennifer Brooks, when she was on a couple of weeks ago, and both English and Spanish moving forward to meet that critical need as far as childcare goes. So that is great. We'll be back next week with webinar number 274. Number 274, our guests are going to be Dr. Mark Novak and Jennifer Patino, and they are with the Cal State Bakersfield Extended Educational Global Office, EEGO. And they are going to be our partner in training for this particularly new program that's coming through the city of Bakersfield that we will announce next week on not April 26th, on May the 3rd. So that's May the 3rd. Honestly, no Groundhog Day on Webinar Wednesday. It'll be May the 3rd. So, you know, that is it for today, unless you have some questions. And let's go back and revisit and see if Sarah can rejoin us. And actually, we don't have a question. So sorry about that. Let's jump into the chat box and make sure that everybody's aware of what resources were put into the chat box today. And there's a link to the rural disaster home repair grants that you can grab, the public site to help applicants determine eligibility that was mentioned. Stephen Nodum, his contact information here in California for the housing program. Sarah Marquart. And Sarah Marquart did a great job today. Her contact information is there, along with information on the Kern County micro businesses, little flood surveys if you have as far as storm damage. So in Inyo County and Mono County storm damages, report the damage. There's still potentially not too late to be added to any of the counties. Thank you, Sarah. DR 4683. Perfect. So DR 4683, the first disaster that started in late December and ran through January as declared by FEMA. A lot of coastal flooding on that and some of the central San Joaquin Valley, whereas it seems like those of us throughout central California, including Kern, Tulare counties, etc., was impacted by the next disaster, DR 4699. There is a list of your open right now, this very moment. You can go visit a Kern County Disaster Recovery Center, where SBA and FEMA, if FEMA is applicable, in both Kern and Tulare counties, 4 offices. And there's the IRS information, our YouTube channel, and anything else. So I guess that's it. Sarah, are you still there?
I'm here.
We'll jump in and say hi and say bye.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the chance to come in and speak to everybody and highlight the programs and resources we have. And I encourage people not to be dismayed if you're not sure which program may or may not work. And for instance, the question about the zoo, there's still not a clear answer yet, but reach out to us and we'd love to talk about it a little bit more if there's not any needs out there. Don't hesitate.
Great resources. A lot of federal agencies really coming together on the disaster that has occurred and maybe the disaster that's going to be occurring. So hopefully not. So great information. So thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. Enjoy your time in Alaska. Don't come home with a tan or anything. But
thanks again. Appreciated being here.
We'll think you're in Hawaii then, you know, of Alaska. So thank you for joining us. And that's a wrap on number 274, or excuse me, 273. Webinar number 273, a flip-flop version for Sarah Marquart. I'm Kelly Bearden. We'll see you next week, everybody. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.